May the grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all.
And with your spirit.
My name is Donald Godfrey, and for the few who are here, but also the many who are watching live streaming, welcome to St. Agnes Parish. As we celebrate a virtual Pride in San Francisco, today's gospel reading is a keen reminder that everybody stands equally before the table of the Lord. All are welcome. Whether rich or poor, black or white, straight or LGBTQ+, divorced or single, all are welcome here. Some years ago, I took a group of students from the University of San Francisco to World Youth Day in Sydney. I'd spent a spiritual year there, and when I arrived, I was disappointed to hear that a workshop on LGBTQ Catholics and faith as part of a Jesuit program organized by a friend, Paul Harris, had been canceled after an intervention by the then Archbishop George Pell. I'd helped Paul with masses for this group in Sydney when I was there. Paul was a leader in the LGBTQ Catholic community called Acceptance, and they met in the Jesuit church. He organized a workshop in an alternative venue, which garnered much more attention than it would have done otherwise. And then Paul felt so excluded that he didn't feel he was invited to walk in pilgrimage, which is part of the World Youth Day experience, and an overnight vigil. We were waiting for Pope Benedict. But in a moment watching us marching across Sydney Harbour Bridge, which had been closed, suddenly he had the insight that he had to go back to his home, collect a large rainbow flag, and walk in pilgrim. Somehow, he met the San Francisco group. He placed a rainbow flag on my backpack. Fellow pilgrims started coming up to him and to us, quietly thanking us. Some asked what country we were from because the flags of every country were there. Some said things like, "I'm gay and Catholic, but nobody in my country or group knows. Thank you for being here." Inside the racetrack, a police officer asked Paul to leave. He told him protesters had to gather outside. Paul said, "I'm gay and Catholic," and the officer apologized. I tell Paul's story because he's an example of somebody with this inner freedom Jesus is speaking about. In this situation, he was finding the strength as somebody who is gay and Catholic to follow Jesus in the freedom of the Spirit, even when the parental institution wanted his voice silenced. Years later, a similar workshop to the one that had been banned was an official part of the World Meeting of Families in Dublin. History is already beginning to vindicate Paul. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. When Father George Williams, who is to be the new pastor here, invited me to participate in a service in the Catholic chapel, which was for transgender people who had been violently murdered in the previous year, I realized how courageous gay and trans people really are in San Quentin prison. Black trans lives matter. Finding the freedom to be one's God-given self can be very costly, especially behind bars, even in the Bay Area. One trans Catholic there spoke to me that it was only her faith, knowing that she was truly a child of God, that enabled her to find the strength to face the torture and torments that each day brought her. Today is the 50th anniversary of the first Pride in San Francisco. We share that honor along with Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. About 30 people marched down Polk Street that day, and the next day, a few hundred celebrated at a gay inn just down the road in Golden Gate Park. And while there is much to celebrate, including the Supreme Court decision a few weeks ago, we know we have far to go. The church itself, we need to acknowledge the cruelty we have inflicted on LGBTQ people. It's astonishing how much has been inflicted on us when one considers that Jesus was the prophet of great mercy, the one who came to set us free, so that we might find a way to our own authentic vocation as a child of God. The voices of those who identify as being LGBTQ in the church are only beginning to be heard. And this is a blessing for us. As Bishop Holloway says, religious institutions often give the impression they have heard the last word on God and know God's settled opinion on everything. But the God seen in the face of Jesus in the gospel today, the history of humanity's struggle with God is allowing God the freedom to be God, to be a God of surprises. God has the potential to be new, but the church seems to be so often so old. 30 years ago, this summer, I had the privilege of marching with a Catholic group in Gay Pride in San Francisco. It was the Peter Claver community, run by Catholic Charities, and I was working there on a field placement at the time. And I remember as a Jesuit, I was delighted that we were being blessed by a Jesuit saint, Peter Claver. St. Peter Claver found the courage to identify with black slaves, even when mocked by fellow Catholics who considered them beneath human. Whoever loves family, father, mother more than me is not worthy of me. Have a blessed pride.